My dad truly is the hero of our company.
Watching, and my dad grew the business just one by one. We never advertised. We still don't. It's all word of mouth and referrals.
Our grandfather started, our business started in the security guard industry. He got out of the serving of World War II, started a business providing security guard services.
I mean, just like every, I guess, partnership, we butt heads every once in a while, but for the most part, we can talk through just about anything.
But when you work for a family-owned business, there's just this care and compassion that comes with like, oh, you're a human working for us.
I have access to leadership at a family-owned and operated, SMB sized company. I would never get that at JCI. I would never get that at ADT.
A little secret, I've installed exactly one alarm system in my life, and I did it poorly. All right, well, I'm excited to be here today. Not just me, but I'm joined by Melanie Henson with Stewart Electronics. And Melanie is third generation in a family alarm company. On today's call, we're going to be talking about some of the unique dynamics of working in a family-owned alarm company, either as part of the family or not as part of the family. I have had the opportunity growing up to work in a family alarm company, and I ultimately chose not to stay in the family business, but to be in, somewhat adjacent business in the same industry. And, but I'm excited to have Melanie here with us. Melanie, could you tell us a little bit about you and the history of Stewart Electronics?
Sure. It's hard to do that in an hour, though. I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Right. I love to hear you speak, Jake, when you talk about your pop, because I'm in the same boat. My dad truly is the hero of our company. He started it. His story's a rags to riches story. I wouldn't say riches is the right word, but maybe more rags to complete joy now that he's retired. And I believe that family businesses are the backbone of the American economy. Even though when I got out of high school, I said, I will never work with you crazy people in my family. So I spent 15 years in education, and I taught school, coached high school sports, and God has a sense of humor. It's a whole other story as to how I got back into the family business. But, my dad started it. His dad worked with him. They built burglar alarms. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I posted a video of a little, we call it our treasure trove, our museum, of some things that he's done throughout his years in the security industry. He built his first alarm in 76, and that's what started the business. He was actually working another job trying to make ends meet, and he got fired because his boss saw him faxing something about his alarm business. So that ended up being a blessing in disguise. So I grew up my entire life with my mom and dad as business partners. My brother was in the company from the time he graduated high school. Unlike me, he went and got an associate's degree, and he's never left Stewart Electronics. So today, my brother is my business partner. Our dad's the true hero. He's retired. And I was a sponge when I decided to get back into the business. I listened to every phone call he made. I went on every call with him. I studied the things he did. I tell people I have a Google education, and that's when I decided that, you know what, Dad, I'm going to be able to do what you did. I'm not going to be as amazing as you, but I'm going to take over and I'm going to continue your legacy.
That's awesome. That is so cool. And so how old were you when you first got involved in the business?
Well, I would say I did have my first job in high school working for the family business, right? Because that's a rite of passage when you turn old enough to work. And I remember sitting at a desk and my dad giving me, if I'm not mistaken, it was probably data entry into some kind of spreadsheet. If you know me, I don't sit still. It is very difficult for me to sit still. I'm a mover and I like to go. And I remember trying to position my head and my hand in a way that it would look like I was doing data entry, but I would take because I hated a desk job. And then he would come by and holler at me, and I just, that was my first introduction into the family business. But after I got out of teaching, I started doing a sales job, and I did real well with that. And again, it's a really long story, but I did stand at a crossroads of, hey, what do I want my next career to be? And going back to teaching was a thought. And obviously, that might have been an easier path. But as I was in the family business, working part time, helping them do some things, working with my brother, my sister in law, my mom, and my dad, I saw a fit for me there.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And so, how many other folks do we have on here that are second generation in or second or third generation in a family business? Do we have any other second or third generation folks on the call? I can relate so much to that, Melanie. I started working in my parents' office until I guess they thought I was capable of going out in the field. A little secret, I've installed exactly one alarm system in my life and I did it poorly. It was so bad, but I did run some wires on new construction, and they had me out doing pre-wires. I excelled at getting lunch for the crews. That's where I really shine. They would tell me, "Hey, Jake, why don't you go out and pick up lunch for everybody?" So I was really good at that. Nicole, thanks for jumping on. Are you second generation in the business?
Yeah, second. Mhm.
And can you relate it all to a little bit of what Melanie's talking about there?
Yeah, I mean, we joke, look, it was child labor. Me and my brother and sister would stuff envelopes at billing time when we were like way too young to work.
I
You
can
know,
still taste the adhesive on the envelopes.
exactly. So that's interesting and watching, and my dad grew the business just one by one. We never advertised. We still don't it's all word of mouth and referrals, and he did a lot of door knocking, and so it's really nice to watch to see all that. And like I said, we were involved from the beginning. I went on and had my own career. I went to college. I did my own career in something completely different for 15 years before I came back. But it's cool to see the where, I don't know where it'll come. I have 2 boys, I have 2 kids, maybe it would be great if then eventually they're gonna be involved. We'll see. My brother worked on the trucks a little bit when he was younger. He learned how to help mount detectors and run some wires. He ultimately, did a different career in a different industry, but it's nice. It's really nice to see that, everything come to fruition and, where we are now.
Jake, I love that Nicole's a female. I do firmly believe we need more women in the security industry.
And to work at conferences, it's the only time there's no line for the women's restroom.
Yeah, that's a good point. Goodness, that's a real advantage. I've been in those lines. It's a lot of dudes waiting to use the restroom, but it's funny you say that. I have a very dear friend of mine. He's I guess not his first generation. They don't have any doesn't have parents that were in the business, doesn't have children that'll go in the business. But he brought his wife, finally recruited his wife to join the business, and she's a rock star. I mean, like she's just, I know Melanie, you do sales and she came from a sales background and just changed the game. It's really cool to see women getting into the space and really doing well with it. That's awesome. We've got Jesse on as well. Jesse, you're second generation?
Third generation.
Third. Okay, cool. And
Yeah,
so,
75 years this year.
wow. So your grandfather started the business I assume grandfather, but tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Yeah. So our grandfather our business started in the security guard industry. He got out of the serving of World War II, started a business providing security guard services and been based in Sioux Falls ever since then. My uncle is a second generation owner. Then my brother and I purchased it back in 2012.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have any customers from the very beginning?
I don't know if from the very beginning, but we have quite a few of them for like 30 plus years.
Wow. That's so cool. I think that I'm always amazed by, even in my dad's case, he has now protected grandparents, I think parents and maybe grandkids. Dad, are you on? Have you guys now done 3 generations or 2 generations?
Yes, I am here. Hopefully you can hear me. And yes, we have done 3 generations.
And I'm not trying to point out how old you are on the call, Dad. I was just trying to say how cool it is to see these family businesses that, not just within the business, the families, that are protected are really cool too, right? I mean, it's amazing to see generations of customers. We've got Scott on, and Scott, I've had the pleasure of meeting your son Ian. Is he involved in the business? And are you? I mean, I always assume you started it, or did you start the business, Scott?
Yeah, I started the business and Ian is sitting in here with me and we're just on the same call. So, but I'll let him speak since he's the second generation. I did start the business.
Awesome. Well, Ian, What's it like working for your dad?
Oh, it's great working with him every day. I mean, just like every, I guess, partnership, we butt heads every once in a while, but for the most part, we can talk through just about anything, and we work very well together. Do everything from installation to service to administrative work together.
Oh, that's so great to hear. I think, and I'm glad you brought that up, right? The occasionally butting heads. I don't know of a family business out there where I don't know of a family out there where people don't butt heads from time to time. And as a nice segue into kind of our first theme of balancing family and business dynamics, I am curious, Melanie, I'll start with you. How do you guys, now with your grandfather in the business, your dad is retired, but I imagine at some point there was a transition period. Can you talk about how that went and how you kind of overcame those inevitable challenges of one generation kind of wanting to do things a little bit differently?
Well, I would say the transition happened a little organically, and then it did come to a blow. I will say that, but the best advice I can say is you have to have intentional conversations about it, and you have to be able to communicate clearly about what your expectations are. For my father and I, we're very much alike. So what was happening is I was beginning to take on the leadership role. He was removing himself, but he still needed validation. And I saw this real clear. And if you're a younger generation, I would encourage you, do not forget that the older generation, my dad would get upset when he felt like he wasn't being heard. And it wasn't that we weren't listening to his advice. I had to tell him one time, I said, Dad, you can have your feelings hurt that we're not choosing to use your spreadsheet. We've done it a different way. Or you can pat yourself on the back and say, wow, what a great job I did educating my son and daughter how to organically move into taking over this business. And I don't know if you can see the window behind my head.
Yeah.
And see, there's a window directly. I'm sitting in our office, and right behind me are four houses in a row, my brother's, mine, my grandparents, and my parents. So
Oh my goodness, it's a compound.
it is. And when I say we are a close family, we are a close family. But it doesn't mean we don't have challenges. And you just have to maneuver those and work really hard to put the right people in the right seat. My brother couldn't sit in my seat and I couldn't sit in his. And it is very important to identify strengths and don't just make assumptions that, oh, because you're family member X, then you're going to sit here in this seat. That's important. And we couldn't have done what we're doing now and we're still working on it. But if you don't have a plan in place and someone to help you with that plan, the best thing we did transitioning the ownership of our company to my brother and myself was hire a consultant because there's hard conversations they can sit in and you can stay on track and you can have them without it coming to a family quarrel.
Let them be the bad guy. Let them be the bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's probably on this call, him and his wife, because he was, and there's the bad guy a lot when I have to say, okay, we got to have a meeting. We got to get this conversation across to the team. So, Robert Few, if you don't have somebody working for your business to help you transition to the next generation, Robert Few's the man to do that. So,
Yeah, and Robert does some work with us as well, and kind of working with some folks on my management team. And so, Robert, I appreciate you being the bad guy from time to time when it's needed. Melanie, you talk about. Oh, go ahead. What was that, Robert?
I'm trying to get through TSA in Miami right now, and my head's not going to fit through the scanner. Y'all keep talking.
I mean, he's okay. I don't know. I like Shannon best, but Robert's all right.
well, I love to say in our office, proper planning prevents poor performance. And if one of the things I realized is that when I looked at my brother one day and I said, Anthony, I said, I think it's time we start, putting things into place to take over the business. I knew I was in trouble when he said, well, that's just the inevitable. I'm like, nope, that's not how that works. It's got to come with a plan. And if you're just waiting around on that generational business to fall in your lap, it's not going to happen. You got to have a plan in place. You got to get things in order. One of the biggest things we had to get in order was separating personal expenses. My parents this was their livelihood. So with Robert's help, we were able to really get everything in order as we began to prepare for what's next. So,
Yeah, that's so talking about running expenses, we won't get into this is not a call about appropriate deductions and appropriate deductions. We'll bring Mitch Reitman on for that for another call. But I do, when we're talking about families involved in the business and the family dynamics that come into play and the business dynamics, some folks are in different positions, and some positions, compensation might be different, right? So like, are you able to speak to, do you lean on a third party to kind of help with those conversations as it relates to compensation? Somebody might make more than somebody else, or, has that ever been something y'all have talked about?
are you asking me, Jake?
I am, if you're willing, if you're okay speaking to that.
That one's kind of hard. I will say I use Robert a lot for that. I mean, when when we're trying to identify who gets what and who makes what, that and our accountant is really where we're at. But the reality is when you own a business, you gotta understand you get fed last.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I come from other careers into this career. My brother's been here since he was riding along in the truck with my dad when he was 16 years old. He's never done another job. He's the smartest person I know. He can make anything work. He can make anything talk to it. But, this is the only job he's ever had. I think that we have to have hard conversations as brother and sister. I came in later, but, we're equal partners.
Do you
And
set any guardrails on where those conversations take place? I mean, are those conversations that you're consistently having at the office, or do those conversations make it to the Thanksgiving table?
A great question. Because one of the things I put in the notes, talking notes for today was in bold was do not discuss work at the Easter egg hunt or at the birthday party. We try really hard to not do that. I remember growing up, I hated listening to my mom and dad argue, and they didn't argue a lot. I grew up with, I was very great, blessed with a wonderful family, but hard conversations would come into the home, and I just remember just cringing anytime I had to hear it. So we work hard to not talk about work when we're not at work. Um,
Yeah. What about bringing in fam? I'll tell you this. I have 3 siblings, and when we were young kids, man, we'd be at the office screaming at each other. I mean, we would have an all-out brawl from time to time. So, do you have to separate? I mean, I understand separating the business side or the business side out of family functions. Do you make an intentional effort to keep some of the family stuff out of the day-to-day of the business?
Yes, my brother lives right behind me. I'm 2 doors down. Between the 2 of us, we have 3 daughters. So, I think was her name Rachel, the lady that spoke? So, we have our 4th generation are 3 girls. My daughter's graduating in May, and believe it or not, Jake, she's pursuing, job interviews in the security realm. So, I did not push her to do that, but I'm super excited about it.
So not working for you, but in the industry?
We decided we would not let them work for us out of high school. So, but kind of back to your question, a couple of times they've came up here and, we're not a brick and mortar store, but we're a business. So we have to
Sure.
make sure, hey, take that, take that back home. We're running a business here. So
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I'm glad you brought up the point of your daughter looking to work in the industry, but not in the business. I was talking about the subject of the call with one of the gentlemen here at the office, Doug. I don't know if anybody knows Doug. Robert knows Doug. And I was saying, we're going to talk about being in a family business and what some of the secrets to success is. And Doug says to me, he goes, I think it's having 2 offices 12 miles apart. And it was funny because what he was referring to is, I have, this distribution business, and my dad owns the alarm company, and we're actually 8.8 miles apart. I looked it up to see, but it is for me wanting to be in the same industry, but not wanting to be in the family business. That was the choice. That was the choice for me, right? Like I wanted to kind of do my own thing, but I also didn't want to throw away all those things that I learned growing up, in the industry and all the, even a lot of the folks that I got to meet, at all those. I'm sure you went to lunch with your dad and vendors, and, you probably got to know all the manufacturers reps pretty young. Would that be true?
Yeah, I mean, I remember my dad ran an automation university and trained dealers from all 50 states back in the late 80s, early 90s when we were big in the smart home industry. And I can remember, I was still going to college to be a teacher. I didn't really want to be in the business, but I remember getting excited when it was Automation University because I'd go up there and help and talk to all the people. I've always been a people person. To me, relationships are key to success. And I love to meet people and talk. And I saw that in my dad. And so I learned a lot of that skill. Life is the people you know, and opportunities is also that's the people that you know as well. So
So, is there anybody on the call that is a non-family member in a family business? So, not part of the family, but working for a family business. And I think I love the perspective. First of all, I want to thank you all for jumping on the call because I think that this perspective is important for folks in leadership positions within family businesses to hear some of this feedback too, because ultimately we want to build strong company cultures, whether it's a family business or a corporate business. We want to make sure that our folks are happy and feel valued, and so I'm going to start. Please keep your hands up for me. I'm going to start with Andy Klein. Andy, tell me a little bit about the family business that you work for.
Yeah, so I'm with American Alarm and Communications, and we're a second generation security system company in New England. Dick Sampson, who recently passed away, founded the company in 1971, and now his boys Wells and Lou are running the show. I've been with the company for 10 years, and my mentor who brought me, I was from outside the industry, my mentor who brought me in, David Oles, was the second generation son of an alarm company owner who they didn't want to do the acquiring. His dad wanted to retire, and David did not want the responsibility of running the show. And so now David and I are commercial reps for American Alarm, and what was Alphatronics, which was a 30-something-year-old company at the time when they were acquired 15 years ago or so, became American Alarm's Worcester, Mass office. It's interesting. What's probably more interesting for me, Jake, is we average as a company an acquisition every 12 to 18 months
Wow.
for the last decade, and watching as other family owned and operated companies get acquired and talking with, the family members who do stay on, which is not always, but more often than not, somebody is staying on for some amount of time, and
Yeah.
hearing it's an adjustment for everybody. Let's just put it that way.
As those folks are coming into another family-owned business, and could you give us some context here about how many employees are on the team there at American Alarm and Communications?
Yes, so we're around 300, and I want to say when I joined the company, we were between, and this is quite the range. I want to say that we were between 150 and 200
Wow.
when I joined a decade ago. And some number of those employees are acquisitions that have been added. Some of it's organic growth, but there are definitely some of those are acquisitions.
Have you worked for not a family business before? And I assume you have, yes?
Oh yeah. I've worked for everything from medium size, the traditional definition of a medium size, 500 person company, all the way to some of the, very large publicly traded companies.
And so, because this call is recorded, I'm not going to ask you what you don't like about working for a family-owned alarm company.
If they want to fire me, they can. I'll tell you what is. I'm not going to say. Let's rephrase it. What is difficult is that there's a perception, and it's a perception. Whether it's the reality is a different story, of adversity towards progress and not wanting to shake the boat because it's done. This process or this staffing level or this insert here has worked the same for insert number of decades. Why do we need to change this? And wouldn't you know that most of the time when you go and you accept that maybe we need to grow beyond this leadership structure, or maybe we need to grow beyond using consultants and bring this person in-house. Wouldn't you know that it ends up typically working out in favor of progress?
Would it be safe to say that it's not even just some things are a status quo, but maybe they're more like seen as a tradition, and a tradition is something that, you hold on to more than just a standard. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, to a certain degree.
And then what do you really like about working for a family business? I mean, what is it that keeps you excited about doing what you do for, one of the largest family-owned alarm companies in the Northeast?
Oh, that's easy. A few months ago, there was something going on that it wasn't bad. It just it needed to we needed to go and take a second look at something, and I asked my boss for or not asked. I told my boss, hey, the CEO, the son who runs the show, Wells, he's got an open door policy, and I told my boss, hey, I'd like to go talk to Wells about this strategic issue that I see. Do you have a problem with that? And his response was, no, go for it. That's what Wells is there for. And Wells will tell you that in the last 10 years, he's had probably four quote unquote, open door phone calls with me. And every single time he has learned things that he needed to know and taken action on those things. And I have been heard. And I'm not afraid of that. I have access to leadership at a family owned and operated, SMB sized company. I would never get that at JCI. I would never get that at ADT. I would never get that at insert big company name here. Nothing against those organizations. I'm not throwing shade at them, but when I worked for Old Castle Materials, this big publicly traded company, I was a number, not a number.
But, I want to put this in perspective though, guys, for everybody else that's on the call. I think there may be a few folks in the call that are at scale like that, right? But or larger than that. But I think for a lot of folks on the call, less than 100 employees, less than 50 employees. And Andy works at a company with 300 plus employees and has access to the CEO when he feels like he needs to share something, when he wants to bring something to his attention. And I think that this is something that a lot of companies lose at a much smaller size. I want to point that out, that I think that is exceptional. I think that it's really awesome to see that you feel comfortable, going and bringing something to Wells's attention, even, four times in the past, was it four times in the past 10 years, you've said, hey, I need to, yeah. And there was never a question. Like you could just bring that in and you felt like you were heard.
Oh, not only was there not a question, it was a priority because what I think happens, and this is just what I've seen it with my colleagues, and I also talking with other colleagues both in and out of our industry, Jake. I think that there is a perception that, that someone's not reachable or that they don't care, but they can't care about what they don't know about. And most good leaders like Wells, when you go and you ask, as long as you're not abusing it or being flippant with it, hey, I see something and I really, this is problematic. And I could give you a specific example if you want, that's short, that resulted in a family company being acquired by American Alarm. When those people in charge are actually decent leaders who are empathetic and who actually want to hear what their people think and see, they're in the corner office of a 300-person company. They don't see what I see. They can't see what I see unless I bring it to them and I direct their fire.
Yeah.
That's it's just good. It's good leadership, but it's also people think about leadership, they forget that there's followership. It's good followership on my part to go and bring things to the boss man.
Amen to that. I can tell you, like, the worst problems, the worst issues are in my perspective, are the things I don't know about, right? So, like, it's a priority for me, and we're a small team. I mean, I have 22 folks in the team here. We are small, but it's amazing how even with, I like to think I'm pretty approachable, that, anybody could come talk to me about whatever they need. But sometimes folks just don't think it's enough of a priority to bring it to my attention, and maybe not even enough of a priority to bring it to their, manager's attention. And then you have something that just goes on a long time broken. And so, for those of you that are on the call here that are in a leadership position within any of these family owned companies, I would encourage you, embrace that open door policy. I do know for a fact that that there are from time to time some folks that may abuse it, and you might have to set some guardrails. You might have to be like, "Hey, look, this is a good thing. I'm glad that you this is something that I'm glad you brought to my attention, but I also want to reintroduce you. I want to reintroduce you to your manager, who's going to be more than happy to help you with that specific type of thing, right?" Obviously, Andy hasn't abused it, and look at how it makes him feel to be that plugged in, right? To be that plugged into the company and not just be a number. Thanks so much, Andy. We've got Cindy on the call. Cindy, you work for a family business, and tell us what you like about it.
I mean, I pretty much love everything about it. And I don't know that I can put anything in specific in words. But I guess the biggest thing would be that I'm not a number, and that kind of helps me.
Is there anything? Have you worked for another type of like a more of a corporate business in the past?
I have not. The previous company that I was with, it was kind of also like a family-owned business, but the owner was based out of the Bay Area versus here. It's different. Most of our customers actually thought that I was, well, not just me. They thought that my brother, my sister, and I were the owners. So it is different, being here in Atwater and having the owner here, but I really enjoy it.
That's awesome. And would you say, can you point to one particular thing that the leadership team has done there that you think has been really had a positive impact on the culture there?
I just love, how everyone is so supportive and helpful versus, even before, even though it was a family owned, they were so far away that they weren't really involved. So you just kind of had to figure out everything yourself versus here. There's always help and support because with security, there's so many things like you're always learning things. So I've I've gone a long ways and I know a lot, I think, but I'm still learning every day. So just to have them here and be able to help me and support me, I love it.
That's awesome. So again, we're talking about accessibility, right?
Yes.
We've seen that now twice as kind of a central theme to positive culture within these family-owned companies. I think that's really awesome, Cindy. Thank you so much for sharing that. Clint, you have some experience working for a family-owned business. Did you have experience prior to that? Could you tell us a little bit about your experience working there?
Mine was almost the exact opposite of Melanie. I was actually going to school to go into education and started working in a warehouse with Peak Alarm while I was at school and fell alarm with the industry. So never made it to the education side and worked up through the ranks at Peak. So yeah, 31 years with family business, recently sold. So they were not able to successfully transfer from first to second generation. So, but all the benefits that's been discussed already, I agree with. Being right there with the owners, having their ear, being small enough that you can take care of each other, take care of your customers, just great things. The only thing I would say, because I started with Jerry, the founder of Peak, when I was quite young, and he was still pretty young. And so I was about the same age as his oldest kids. And so as I got to see them coming into the industry and working alongside with their father as I was working with them. I would say one of the things that would be important as you bring in the second, third generations is to clearly set the boundaries up front of what's, who mom and dad is at work and who they are at home and setting those boundaries and emphasizing chain of command. Some of the issues we saw early on with some kids could go straight to dad and not follow chain of command and some of the issues that would cause, but figured it out and they made things were really good for the last 20 plus years.
That's awesome. And is it right? Am I right in saying that you have a son that works in the business?
Yeah, yeah, it was more than just Jerry's family. It was just many of us have family there, and so yes, over the 30 plus years, I've got a son that currently works and runs operations for us in Salt Lake City. I had another son that worked there for a number of years. I've had my wife running the office at one of the branches. So yeah, we have many families within the family business, and it's awesome. We encourage it.
That's so cool. I've really enjoyed getting to know so many family-owned companies throughout the country. And then the families within those family-owned companies, it's tough. I feel like in a more corporate company, that might even be frowned upon, right? Like it's like, hey, like but in a family-owned business, they understand the value of that cohesiveness, right? Like what that can mean. So I think that's pretty cool. I think that's really cool. Mindy works for an awesome family-owned company in Oklahoma City. Mindy, can you tell us a little bit about your experience working for a family-owned company, a little bit about Alcom, and what you value the most about work? And you, correct me if I'm wrong, were you a teacher?
Yeah, so
Yeah, we got a lot of teachers on this call. A lot of people that were either we've got Clint was gonna go into education. We've got Melanie who's a teacher. We've got Mindy as well. So tell us, first of all, tell us how you got into working at Alcom and tell us what you like the most about working for a family business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Alcom, we have about 20 employees, so smaller. Yes, I was in education before that. I taught second grade for almost 10 years, and I said I would never leave teaching until I kind of felt the pain of kind of a corporate setting of like, okay, why am I putting in all this work and I'm getting paid exactly the same as the teacher that shows up 5 minutes late and leaves 5 minutes early? So I was kind of feeling some stress of that. So that sort of pushed me out of teaching itself, not knowing where I was going to go. Taylor McKinney. So Mike McKinney is the father of Taylor McKinney and started it about 35 years ago. Taylor has now kind of taken over. And we've just been best friends for about 15 years. So when I was thinking about leaving teaching, I was like, hey, I can help. I don't know what I would do for you, but let's work together. And it was like, he wasn't wanting to hire me because I was like family. And there was like, I don't want this to cause tension or whatnot. He had some other stuff go on that made him like not want to. So I started working for a home builder for a couple years, decided to get out of that. And I had to like sell myself to Taylor more than I've had to work for a job ever my entire life.
Was it worth it?
Yes. So finally hires me on and we just work really well together, even though we're like family. But there's a huge difference. And I know someone earlier said this, like it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. But when you work for a family owned business, there's just this care and compassion that comes with like, oh, you're a human working for us. And so it's not, there are rules and there's expectations and they need to be met, but there's more of a heart in the company and that compassion that comes with it being family owned and operated. And then people like to hear that we're a local family owned and operated business and they want to support that. So, yeah, no, I have loved it more for just the freedom it's provided for me and my family, and then just the peace and comfort of not being so scared of corporate setting.
Well, first of all, thank you for jumping on, Mindy. I'm glad that you did finally convince Taylor to hire you on because you are a rock star and indirectly you've contributed to my sales as well because the more you sell, the more I sell. So I appreciate that.
I love it.
Melanie, for your non-family employees, for the folks that are and you do have non-family employees, yes?
Yes.
How do you how do they fit in? I mean, is there a lot of difference between being a family member versus being a non-family member in terms of kind of policies, things like that? How do you keep that balance so nobody feels like an outsider?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me this.
Oh,
But
no.
telling myself, excuse me, that is a challenge. And one of the things that we worked on last year, because I had an employee leave who was a rock star. And when he left on his exit interview, and I tried to keep him, but he had his mind made up, he was leaving. He said, I'll never be a Stewart. And that hit hard. I really had to reflect on that. I'm like, where did we go wrong? Where did I miss the boat on losing out on this employee who was a great employee? And I don't want any of my employees to feel like there's not an opportunity here if their last name doesn't have Stewart in it. So what we did is, and what we're still working on, and I can tell you, Jake, this is, for us learning how to scale and do things successfully. Family businesses sometimes can have a very informal culture, so that creates a more lax approach to things, and people thrive better when they have SOPs, that are, you do things by the book, right? And a family business is like mine, who's learning how to get over this growth. We have slow and steady growth, but what we're looking for now is, healthy, faster growth. So we're trying to we created a mission statement around the word family. So now we want to make sure employees and our customers, when we throw the word family around in there, it's not family, oh, your last name's Stewart. It's family, oh, you're welcome to our family of protected homes. Welcome to our family of employees. And I really tried to change how I converse, how I talk to people. We meet every Monday. We do a very informal roundtable meeting. It used to be formal. That didn't work out. Now everybody meets in the lobby on Mondays. We say a prayer and everybody gets a voice. Nobody's any more important than the other person. Everybody, if you have something to say, you get to say it in that Monday morning meeting. So again, I don't know that I have that down to a science, Jake, but that is something that's really important and has to be worked on. Otherwise, your employees feel like they're not a steward or they're not in the family. So what's the point? Why should they work hard to get to climb the ranks? And that's another thing that Robert helped me understand. If you don't show them the ranks, they don't know what they're working for.
Yeah.
So, and that's important too, to establish that. I always struggle with this word hierarchy chart, right? Like who answers to who. And that has to be put in place early. And when I first started here, we didn't have that. And when I first started here, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I all had an office. And when we hired people, it was like they didn't know who their boss was. Who I go. So we really make sure we have good conversations on who you're going to for what. And we're working on everybody's a part of the family, not just, oh, you're a family member. So, and it kind of goes back to what I said before. You have to identify who can get in what seat. You got to put the right people in the right seat, whether they're family or not family. That
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. This is a tough one for me because I have met second and third generation folks that should not be in leadership positions within their and none of you are on the call. So nobody think I'm none of you are on the call. But I have met second and third generation, folks that are in leadership positions within the companies, and they are toxic leaders. I mean, just really like it's not even just that they don't have it ironed out. Like it's that they just walked into that role and there may not have been qualifications. It didn't necessarily matter who had, maybe been in a position that might have moved into that rank more naturally if there wasn't kind of the family dynamics in play. And I would say that for anybody that's on the call that has young kids that are, young adult kids that are looking to get into the business, the best thing I've seen companies do is to put those kids in roles that are not leadership positions and work them throughout the company so that they can learn the business. If your goal, there's nothing wrong with building a company with the intention of having the next generation come into a leadership position. But I have to tell you, I have seen some situations where that person just wasn't prepared. And not just that they couldn't get there, that they just did not give them the opportunity to really rise to that leadership position. So if you do have kids that you're thinking, hey, maybe this is the right thing for them. If you don't have kids and you say, hey, where is this business going to go? You should still be looking at your team and saying, hey, how do I prepare these folks if that's the goal? If the goal is continuity of the business, how do I put these folks in a position that they'll be prepared for it? Do that for folks that aren't family. Definitely do that for folks that are family, right? And Melanie, thank you so much for sharing some of that. Now, Andy, you talk about going from 150 employees to 300 employees during your tenure. No doubt directly attributable to your excellent salesmanship. I mean, look at you. You've doubled the company since you've got there. Talk to me about how American has scaled while maintaining family values.
Well, if you think that's all my fault, that growth, listen, I've got a bridge in Baltimore Harbor to go and sell you for $1. The Sampsons put in place some longtime leadership that were capable of building the company to scale. People like, and I don't know if he's on today, like people like John Tanner, etc., who have been instrumental in bringing the company to scale. The Simpsons also, everything runs on the four-way test from Rotary International. And if if we're dealing with a decision, especially customer facing or even internal facing, where it's difficult to understand what the right path forward is, normally you can go and look at your options on the table, look at the four-way test, and one of the options will match the four-way test, the best. It's typically the better option to go with, in my opinion. So that's how I think that they've done it. I have colleagues who, because of, I can't even figure out why, Jake, they are afraid to go and talk to ownership with a major issue, and they'll let stuff fester. But then I look at my experience with giving Will Sampson a call and saying, "Hey, can we talk?" He's always been open to me, and it's never there's never been a negative consequence after the fact. It's people are just nervous about talking up the chain, and
Yeah.
especially unless you're, I hate to use the phrase ratting, unless you're ratting on your boss. Most bosses, especially if they are a good boss, like almost all of mine have been, almost. There was one guy, he didn't last long. They'll empower you to go and talk to the owner,
Yeah.
and and by keeping that owner connected, it makes for positive culture. There's always room for improvement over here, but I've seen it a lot worse.
I want to point this out. You could have the best corporate culture in the world. You could have an open door policy. You could have folks come to you with their concerns and you could hear them out and you could address their concerns. But some things you can't overcome when somebody has internal fears, biases, just the way that they are. All of us bring who we are to the table with whatever company we're at, right? And so it could be that the CEO has an open door policy, but for whatever reason, maybe a past experience, we're afraid to go to leadership with something. I'd like to point out that as leaders, I know there's a lot of folks in leadership positions on this call. That's why it's not just enough to have an open door policy. You need to make sure that messaging gets out directly to everybody on your team, but also through your middle managers, right? The folks that they are directly reporting to, so that when somebody like Andy comes to them with an issue, to Andy's point, they're encouraging it, right? They're not saying, "Hey, no, you better not go talk to him. I don't think that's a good idea. Let's just keep your head down and keep doing it." You really have to get that messaging down throughout the ranks. And I would also point out when somebody says something you don't like, right? Obviously, you need to be respectful about it. But when somebody says something that you disagree with, that challenges something that you think you have to be there to hear it too. And so just thank you for sharing that, Andy. I think that is one of the key differentiators between family businesses and some of these really big, corporate companies. You can have that kind of thing. And I don't know that it fully exists in some of these big corporate companies. At least I know it exists more prevalently in these family-owned businesses. I wanted to speak to this before the end of the call. Succession planning is something that you should start right away. Melanie spoke to this and she had a conversation with her brother about, at some point taking over the business, right, Melanie? And he said, well, that's inevitable, but it is something that needs to be planned for early on. And I would also say that if you are planning to put the next generation into the leadership position within the company, I would encourage you to do your best to make sure you're not passing down a very broken, dysfunctional company. Because I've seen this too. I've seen very capable, very qualified, incredible young people coming into leadership positions within companies that are broken, companies that have toxic cultures, companies where they're inheriting employees that should have been fired decades ago, but have been there and are expected to stay there even after they quote unquote take the reins. And so, to Melanie's point, start planning early. Melanie, do you want to give us any advice on, I mean, I know you've talked about bringing in, outside consultants, but is there any other like key advice you want to give to folks as they start planning for, the succession of their business?
Wow. I thought I could do it by myself, and I quickly realized I couldn't. So I just can't tell you how important it was for us to find a consultant that was helpful. And if you're not in a situation to do that, I mean, there's a lot of conversations that you can have with people who are doing it successfully. Piggybacking off what you said, I know we're almost at time. Communication is so important. I have been told too direct at times, but in our industry, working with other people, even if it's a hard conversation, you've got to have the conversation. It's so dangerous when you don't. And for us, we're, working and seeing the people every day that you love, that obstacle is those same people that you are family with, then you're required to have tough work conversations with them. And you just got to rip the band-aid off and do it. And if it means TCX Exchange and Robert and Shannon have to help you rip that band-aid off, then get somebody to do it. But you've got to have a plan. It will not happen without a plan. And the other advice I would say is pray about it. I mean, pray together on what is the next big thing for your business. Because I wrote a statistic down, only 3%, well, 30% of companies move on to the second generation. I think 11 or 12% move to the third, and only about 3% would move to a fourth generation. So
Yeah. Yeah, and look, there's something to be said for making an honest assessment early on, right? I think we owe it to our employees too, right? The folks that helped us get there, right? To make sure that this is well planned. It's not just, hey, how is this going to work out best for me? Not just how is it going to work out best for my kids? How is it going to work out best for the legacy of the company I've built, right? And the folks that helped me get there. I want to emphasize how important that planning is. I want to thank you all for jumping on this call. If there's specific topics within today's call that you think we could unpack a little bit deeper, I see some notes on here from Sam talking about maybe a more in-depth conversation about succession planning and transitioning from one generation to the next. And feel free to email me, send me a note, let me know. I'd love to queue it up for another call. Whether you do business with us today or not, I want to thank you for being on this call. We've got a lot of really great partners on the call. Melanie, I'm proud to bless and brand Melanie's panels as well, and glad to have you here. But if you don't do business with us, I'd invite you to reach out. I'd love the opportunity to work with you. I own a distribution company. It's a family-owned business, and I think I'd love the opportunity to work with you and support you and your family-owned businesses as well. But whether you do or don't, you're welcome on this call. We'll be back online next Friday at 11 a.m. And I hope that all of you have an awesome weekend. Thanks so much for being here.